Hi guys, James at Rampant Lion Reviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one, we are going to stick to Sweden and we're going to return to a brewery that has featured on the channel a good number of times before. I've had some really nice beers from these guys over the last couple of years, and they're also one of the top rated breweries here in Sweden. They're mainly known for their Imperial Stouts, although I have had some examples of other styles from them which have also turned out very nicely, but we're going to stick to their signature style today, and we're having a look at a new version of a beer that I have reviewed before. So quite curious to see how this particular version turns out, and I hope that you guys enjoy my take on this beer as well. So yeah, for this review we are going to head a little bit south of me here in Lund to Malmö, and we're having a look at another beer from Brewing. So this one is the latest edition of Override, which they describe as an Imperial chocolate milkshake stout. This one comes in at 10.8% ABV and it is the coconut edition. So yeah, really curious to see how this one turns out. This is the third version of Override that I've tried. The first one that I had a go at was the Christmas edition, and I think that might have been like November or December 2019 that we reviewed that, and then we had the original one a few months after that, come to think of it, and that again was very nice. So yeah, I'm curious to see whether there are any other versions of Override that come out over the next little while, but it's always nice to have another stout from Brewing. And I keep an eye on what these guys are releasing through the local småskaligt assortment. But yeah, very curious to see how it turns out, as I said, and I hope that you guys enjoy my take on it. Incidentally, this beer was released as part of the local småskaligt assortment through Systembolaget for March of 2021, and you can find the Brewing beers fairly easily in the different Systembolaget stores around Malmö. So yeah, let's see how we go. So as always with my reviews, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting, just fast forward. All the usual links are in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that I've done from Brewing before, and you will no doubt see more added to that list in the near future. But there's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The whole channel, of course, has a geography-based tagging system, so you can go into the homepage and search for beer based on country, city, state, county, province, prefecture, whatever it is you happen to be interested in. Do check out the playlists of beers from different countries. There is one there for all the Swedish beers that I've reviewed for you. That's constantly being added to, and as always, please do get in touch and let me know some of the other beers and breweries that you guys would like to see me review. It's always great to hear from you guys that are watching the videos, and the support that you show the channel is hugely appreciated. So anyway, to tell you a little bit about Brewing once again, then on to my brewery notes. So as I've mentioned to you already, Brewing are based in Malmö, and the company was founded by Hannes Gruber and Karin Karlsson back in 2015, and this was when they had their premiere at the Malmö Ale and Whiskey Festival. But both were big beer enthusiasts and they wanted to get into the brewing industry. But Hannes had been a home brewer for a long time and he got very good feedback on his beers, and so this was what inspired him to turn professional. But he comes from a background in software development and he takes care of the brewing side of things, whereas while Karin was involved in the company, she was an entrepreneur and a trader within the IT industry, and she managed the business side of the brewery, although she is no longer part of the company. But they started out with a very modest production, but they've now become one of the most highly rated breweries in Sweden according to Untappd, and they've boasted this accolade for quite a while. But most of their beers, pretty much 99% of them, are brewed at Lilla Ölfabriken and Chad Beer. And there has been one or two next door in South Plains as well, but you'll find that brewery in the Rosengård area in Malmö. But the company is now officially joined with Chad Beer and Lilla Ölfabriken, and it's a sort of, it's basically they've got a parent company, and all three of these brands of beer are part of Lilla Ölfabriken. So the parent company, from what I understand, is Lilla Ölfabriken, and then you've got, yeah, Chad Beer, Lilla Ölfabriken, and Brewing all selling beer under different brands, but as part of this parent company. But they mainly brew, this brewery, as I mentioned to you earlier, Brewing mainly brew Imperial Stouts. They've also released a few IPAs and barley wines and a couple of other things over the years. I've reviewed one barley wine from them, and I've also reviewed, their IPA, which I think was called Switch, if I remember rightly. That was actually very good, and I would love to see a few more IPAs from Brewing, but of course they really have made their name. Everyone knows the Imperial Stouts from Brewing, so I'm not surprised that they're kind of sticking to these, if you like. But for quite a long period of time, other than a few festivals around Sweden, it was very difficult to get a hold of the Brewing beers, but they started selling them through Systembolaget in 2018. and they seem to have fairly regular releases now, although there are still quite a few things that you can only get outside of Sweden. They started releasing some of their barrel-aged stuff recently. I think they've released 4 barrel-aged beers, and I unfortunately missed out on them because I got trapped in Scotland, because otherwise I would have bought them at Kiosk over in Copenhagen. But yeah, they are selling some barrel-aged stuff these days outside of Sweden. I'm not sure if they will redo it and then release it in Sweden at some point in the future, but we'll need to see about that. But as of March 2021, when I'm reviewing this particular beer for you, they've produced around 85 different kinds of beer according to Untappd. Another interesting thing to point out about Lilla Ölfabriken is that I think they might join up with Elm 11 soon. Elm 11 are a fairly new brewery who are doing some really nice kind of Berliner Weisses and things like that, and he's brewing Anders from Elm 11 is brewing a lot of his beers in the same brewery as Nerd. He's brewing a lot of his beers in the Lilla Ölfabriken. So I don't know if he might buy into the company at some point, and then you'll have another brand coming out of there too. But yeah, some really interesting stuff coming out of there. It's nice to see the beer scene in Malmö is picking up a little bit, and Nerd Brewing are one of the ones who are, you know, really helping Malmö increase its standing as a beer city. So yeah, that's all I can really tell you about Nerd Brewing for the moment. If you want to learn more about this brewery, you can check out the brewery website. You can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with the latest going on, and you can also check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages to learn more about all the different beers that these guys have done. I also filmed a Meet the Brewery segment with Hannes, which was really fun, so you can check out that in the Meet the Brewery playlist in the channel section as well, and that was really fun to film. Hannes was very kind and let me do my my first one with him, and I'm sure you'll see Hannes on the channel with me doing some tastings at a festival or something like that sometime soon. But yeah, that's all I can say about Nerd Brewing for the moment. Let's crack on and have a little look at the beer. So yeah, I'll just let you have a little look at the artwork on this one before we open it up. As you can see, the artwork is very similar to what we've had from Nerd Brewing before. You can see all the binary code there, and a lot of the names, of course, I forgot to mention that, a lot of the names of the beers come from like programming terms because of Hannes's background as a software engineer. There you can see the Nerd Brewing symbol, which is pretty cool. And the other thing to point out about this brewery is open source beer. So what Hannes actually does is he puts up the recipes on the website for people to use in home brewing and to teach themselves about beer. So that's one of the big mantras of this brewery, is open source brewing. So yeah, keep an eye on that for sure. But yeah, like I said to you earlier, 10.8% Imperial Stout. This one, they describe it specifically as an Imperial chocolate milkshake stout. 10.8% ABV, and it is the coconut edition. I think I paid about 80 Swedish kroners for this, so that is about £7, maybe about £7.25 or something like that. About €8, and then maybe about $9.50 American, just to give those of you around the world a little reference. One of the things you'll always get from Nerd Brewing is these lovely these wax tops, but of course before doing the video I took a knife and just put a slot underneath the bottle cap there, because otherwise I would really struggle to get it open in the review. But yeah, let's get this guy out and we'll get on with the tasting. As I told you earlier, this is the third version that I'm trying of Override, and yeah, I'm looking forward to it. So yeah, we got this one off quite easily, thankfully. But yeah, let's have a little look at it and see how we go. Oh, you can smell that coconut already. Looks very nice. One of the things that I always like about the Nerd Brewing beers is that even though it's like they're describing this one as an Imperial chocolate milkshake stout, even though they're describing it as that, which you would think will be an overwhelmingly sweet thing, the Nerd Brewing beers always have that little bit of a roasty edge to them, just to let you know, no, this is an Imperial stout. That's one of the things I always appreciate about this brewery. So just before it disappears, you can see the head on this one is about a 1/3, somewhere between a 1/3 and a half finger of a frothy, I would say quite dark, you know, quite a dark but still quite bright tan head on this one. That's just going to fade away to be nothing very, very soon, and it already is, but it's leaving a nice ring just around the edge of the glass. So that's a very rich, almost chocolatey tan coloured head on this beer, which looks very, very nice, I have to say. But yeah, it is leaving just that kind of foamy ring around the edge of the glass, and a few sort of thin wisps on the on the top of it there. So I like how that I do like how that goes together. But yeah, the colour of this one is pretty much as you'd expect. So for an Imperial Stout, it's got that lovely dark ebony rosewood kind of colour, black as night basically. There's one or two big bubbles sticking towards the side of the glass, a few little ones going up towards the bottom of the head there. But yeah, exactly as you would expect from an Imperial Stout. Remember, big Imperial Stouts like this are going to undergo quite long wort boils, probably like 5 hours or something like that. But when it comes to the colour of your beer, it's determined by a couple of things. One, the type of malts that you use in the first place. Two, the length of your wort boil. The longer you boil the wort, the more the sugars caramelise, thus you get a darker colour of beer. Barrel aging and adjuncts can also affect it, although that's not as prominent in Imperial Stouts as it can be in other styles, right enough, and I don't think it's really at play in this one, to be honest. But yeah, it certainly looks very nice, but it looks quite similar to the other Imperial Stouts we've had from Nerd Brewing before. So yeah, nothing overly surprising about the appearance of this beer then. So let's have a closer look at the aroma and just see how we get on with this one. Ooh, that smells nice. I mean, it's not been that long since I had a Nerd Brewing beer, come to think of it. But just on first impressions, the aroma of this one is a fair wee bit different. Yeah, I'm just going to say this could potentially be my favourite aroma that I've had out of a Nerd Brewing beer so far. That's interesting. Yeah. Where do we start with that then? The first impression of this aroma is that it's a lovely, big, very smooth, but also really quite sweet thing. So that kind of fits in with the mantra of it being a milk stout, if you like. So that's definitely going on in here. But the aroma of this beer, I'm just going to say, is absolutely lovely. So thumbs up to Nerd Brewing for this one. I think it's going together very, very nicely. Yeah, I really like this. So yeah, let's try and break down the aroma of this one and see how we go. But first impressions, big, oily, very slick and smooth sweetness out of it. It's really, really nice. So yeah, the backbone of the beer, you can definitely smell a little bit of that roasty, toasty, special B in this one. I know Hannes loves a good little bit of special B, so you can smell a little bit of that kind of roasty, toasty backbone to the beer, like a well-fired bread crust. But the other elements sitting on top of that are really smoothing the whole thing out. It really is very, very nice. So on top of that kind of well-fired bread crust, you will get a wee touch of a kind of brown rye bready type note out of it. You can smell just a little bit of that, but there's a hell of a lot of chocolate in this one. So for me, the chocolate, it actually comes across as really milky. In this one, I would say, about a 40 or 50% cocoa chocolate in this one. You can just smell that. It really leans towards the kind of sweet side of things. I think, is there a bit of lactose in this? It really smells like there's a wee bit of lactose in here. Yeah, it says on the side here there's lactose. I was going to say that's probably one of the reasons why it's coming across as milky as it is. But yeah, it's got a lovely, it really has just a lovely kind of smoothness to it, and I think that's driving the smoothness and sweetness of the chocolate. I actually get quite a bit of vanilla out of this, although it doesn't seem to have vanilla added into the brew. It is more of a kind of milkshakey sort of thing, but that's, I often find that when you get milkshake IPAs and milkshake stouts and things like this, they often just give you the impression of a little bit of they often just give you a little bit of an impression of a kind of vanilla sort of thing and a kind of milky chocolate there. So that's not a surprise to me, to be honest. But the coconutty elements, they feel as if they're kind of mixed in with that sort of vanilla lactosey nose. So they come out a little bit further forward on the nose, I think, to be honest with you. So yeah, the aroma out of this beer, I think, is very, very nice. I do also get quite a little bit of brown sugar out of this one. It's not overly treacly or caramelised or anything like that. It is just a little bit like a kind of sweet, slightly toasty caramel, to be honest with you. You can smell that right in the middle of the nose. So yeah, definitely a wee bit of a sweet caramel there. You get a little bit of a kind of toasted edge to it, and for me that just sits on top of the nice big chocolatey notes that you're getting out of the beer. But the chocolate, like I say, I think that's where the coconut is really coming out of this one. The chocolate mixes in with the kind of vanilla and lactosey elements, and yeah, it's just got a little bit of a it has a nice little bit of of kind of sweetness to it. I mean, it really is more. This is definitely one of the sweeter aromas that I've come across from their brewing, as far as I can think. You know, I've had quite a few stouts from these guys, and it's one thing I have to say, when a brewery does beers that are, you know, so similar a lot of the time, it's quite difficult to remember these subtleties. It's easier to remember, you know, it's easier to remember, or at least if I had gone for about 6 months or something without trying one of these Nerd Brewing beers, I might remember the difference a little bit more, because I mean, you can see, I can tell you straight away, this is one of the sweeter aromas that I've had from compared with other Nerd Brewing ones. But you know, I'm trying to remember some other little subtleties of it, so it's quite, in some ways it's very easy to compare, in some ways it's a little bit more difficult. But when you've got a brewery that kind of sticks to the one style, sometimes it can be a little bit hard to say, right, is this one of the sweeter ones I've had, or is it one of the, you know, is it one of the more kind of bitter ones and things like that. But this one, I think, in terms of the brown sugars, I do think the brown sugar is a little bit more kind of prominent in this too. But it's a lovely aroma nonetheless. I think the aroma out of this beer is really, really interesting. Certainly strikes me as one of the kind of sweeter and more sort of oily ones that I've had from their brewing, and that's never a bad thing. That is never a bad thing. On the back of the nose, you do get a wee bit more of the toasty kind of grainy elements out of the beer, but again, those still come across as being very, very smooth. And you will of course get one or two little woody and other nutty elements out of the aroma with these beers as well. You always get that with Imperial Stouts, and in particular with Nerd Brewing. So yeah, the aroma out of this beer, I think, from the malty, adjuncty side of things is very, very nice. But yeah, lovely big chocolatey notes. The milkshakey side of the beer with the vanilla and the coconut, I think, is really nice too. And then you've got a roasty, toasty backbone to it. I mean, this beer's kind of got everything you'd want, a bit of sweet brown sugar too. So yeah, for a kind of sweet leaning milkshake stout, as they're calling it, I think this one comes across really nicely. I'm just curious to see how that sort of trademark Nerd Brewing roasty, toasty edge comes out in the flavour, because I've no doubt that it will. You get this from, I'm sure I've had this with a couple of the Nerd Brewing beers before, where you think, oh, this is going to be a lot sweeter than the others, but then it still gives you that roasty, toasty thing. So looking forward to that. But yeah, let's focus on the hoppy side of things quickly. On the hoppy side of things, yeah, you get a nice little touch of earthiness out of the beer. You can still smell a little bit of a floral character to it as well, and there is a wee bit of grassiness there too. You would expect all of this. So I forget exactly. I've said, you know, I would think it's something like, you know, Summit or something like that that's in this beer. I could have looked it up on the website before, but whenever I sit down to review the beer, I'm always halfway through the review when I remember that I could actually look and see what hop is in this beer and what malts and things are in it. But you know, if you do that, sometimes it can give you a little bit of a sort of preconception. But I mean, that's it. But yeah, you can still smell a little bit of the hoppy character in this one. Of course, if you age this beer a bit, which you can do with these Nerd Brewing beers, particularly with the wax tops, you will get some of that hoppy character dropping out of it. But I still get a little bit of earthiness out of it. I get a nice wee touch of floral character, and there is a teeny little bit of grassiness in there. What I will say about this one though is I think the fruits in this beer are a little bit sharper compared to some of the other Nerd beers that we've had before. Like, as soon as you go into this beer with the nose, I mean, it comes across as really raisiny. I get a lot of raisiny and a lot of blackberry sharpness out of this one as soon as you go into it. There are other things under that, of course. So yeah, there's definitely how would you say, yeah, you got a lot of raisiny sharpness out of it, you got a lot of black currant, there's some nice juicy plummy notes underneath that. I get a good little bit of a kind of black curranty element to it as well. I'm not getting so much of a kind of lighter figgy note. For me, this one's actually got quite a pungent fruit to it. Yeah, I would stick with raisins, I would stick with black berries, and then you've just got a really thick juicy plum underneath, and a wee bit of a more juicy black currant as well. So yeah, the aroma of this beer is very, very nice, but that's what we've come to expect from their brewing. So yeah, take a bit of time to enjoy the aroma, always worthwhile, but I think it's about time to try this beer now. So yeah, this one is another version of the Override, 10.8% Imperial Stout from Nerd Brewing down in Malmö. This is the coconut edition. Let's get stuck in. Slàinte, skål, cheers. That's very nice. You know, this is, we've come to expect, you know, good stouts from this brewery, and that is nice. It still has that, like I was saying, it still has that wee roasty toasty edge that you expect in Nerd Brewing. I really like that about them, because you know, we're getting all of these days we get all of these kind of big pastry stouts and things like that. The thing that I like about Nerd is that they do stick to a more kind of old school imperial stout. So if you want, you know, we're getting all these Amundsen big sweet things these days, but if you want a good old school stout, you can always rely on Nerd Brewing to give you that. So that's one of my things where I'd say, yeah, hell yeah. So yeah, this is definitely a brewery you need to try. I've been noticing that their beers have been getting out there a little bit more as well. I think I saw a couple of the English guys have been getting a few of these. But yeah, this is a lovely beer, I have to say. I really like how this one goes together. Could potentially be one of my favourite ones that I've had from Nerd Brewing. But you know, again, this is kind of what I was meaning earlier. It's quite difficult to pick. If someone asked me what my favourite beer from Nerd Brewing is, you know, I'd be more likely to say like the barley wine or the IPA or something like that, just because I've had so many good imperial stouts from them. It's really it would be very difficult for me to pick what is my favourite imperial stout from these guys, because they're all really damn good. Like the quality of stout you get out of these guys is, you know, up there. They're some of the best imperial stouts in Europe, if not, you know, in the world. So it's really, for me, I always find that difficult. If someone told me you have to pick your favourite imperial stout from Nerd, I would have no idea, to be quite honest with you. The beers, you know, with a brewery like this, the beers that really stick in your mind are the different styles. But you can always rely on these guys for a beautiful imperial stout, and this is another example of that. But I think this one would be in my top couple of imperial stouts, I would say. It's, as I say, it's just difficult to think of all the ones I've had from them. And I've said to Hannes I would love to see him try a Scotch ale, but he's not so much into that style. But I would love to, with the way that Hannes is like the master of malts almost, I would really love to see him have a go at a Scotch ale, because I think it could rival, you know, the 160 shilling from Tracker House or the old Parochial from Tempest. I would love to see him have a go at that style of beer, because he knows what he's doing. Hannes really knows what he's doing with the malty side of beers, 100%. But yeah, let's try and break this one down for you then. So with this beer, you can feel that nice roasty toasty backbone there. That's your special B, 100%. You get a nice little bit of that toasty roasty special B malt just blanketing the middle of your palate. It's not the harshest actually compared to some of the other Nerd Brewing ones. I don't find this beer as roasty and toasty as some of the others. But yeah, you do get kind of down the middle line of your tongue, you get that roasty toasty special B element out of it. But as you move further out to the side of the palate, you can feel it's got a little bit, there is a wee bit of that kind of brown, almost rye bready type element to the beer. But on top of that, you can feel the lactose right away. The lactose just smoothens that whole thing out, and the middle third of your palate is incredibly smooth and incredibly silky. So yeah, absolutely. If you go to the centre of your palate and then just move forward, what you'll notice is that there is a kind of almondy, pecan-y type nutty flavour just developing out of this one. But within the lactosey elements that you get there, on that front half of that middle third of your palate, you can feel there is a sort of vanilla type flavour comes out of it, and the coconut really sits in there as well. So for me, you do get that big kind of coconutty note out of the beer, but there are a few kind of other regular nuts in there, like hazelnuts, pecans, almonds. You do get a little bit of that kind of thing coming out of this beer too. But I do like how down the middle line of your palate you've got that roasty toasty imperial stout backbone there. But yeah, front half of that middle third of your palate, yeah, you know, vanilla, the lactose in there, and the coconut just kind of mixes in with that. There isn't vanilla in the beer, like I said, but to me it tastes a little bit like there is. But I often find this when you've got lactose at play, it can taste a little bit vanilla like. Yeah. But yeah, the flavour of this beer though is very, very nice. It's, as I say, it's just another beautiful stout. I mean, you can see when you try one of these beers for the first time, they're so striking. You can see exactly why this brewery carries the reputation that it does. No doubt, you know, you'll be under no illusion with this, and I like the kind of the slightly more old school nature of Hanness's beers, absolutely. But yeah, the rest of that middle third of your palate, then you can feel the chocolatey notes coming out of this one. What I would say is, when you take the beer in at first, the chocolate comes across as more a kind of lower percentage cocoa, if that makes sense. So you get a lot of that out of this one, absolutely. So yeah, there's a lot of nice kind of lower. Cocoa notes in the beginning, but the percentage of cocoa, it really kind of seems to ramp up a little bit the further you go into the aftertaste. You will find, and this is common with an brewing beers, the sort of bitterness of these beers increases as you go further into the aftertaste. So yeah, on that back half of the middle third of your palate, you'll start off with a nice kind of, you know, 50-ish% cocoa chocolate, but then it really ramps up to be a lot more kind of roasty and charred. And you get a lot of bitterness out of it, actually, from that perspective. The further you go into the aftertaste, you start to get a more kind of 90% cocoa chocolate out of it later on. But it works, it really does work. It offers you a nice contrast in this beer. You've got the sweeter elements from the adjuncts and the lactose and things like that, and in the beginning you've got a sweet chocolate, and it just transitions to be really dark and roasty and toasty. So I can appreciate that about the beer. So you'll find that middle third of your palate, the back half, I think, is more roasty and toasty, whereas the front half is a little bit sweeter in a lot of ways. But in the very centre of your palate, you've got a big oily caramelly note out of this one. You've got a lovely big oily brown sugary element in there. I don't know if I would go as far as saying, maybe I would actually. I think in the middle of your palate, you've certainly got, there is a big brown sugary element to this one, and that's, you know, that's partially due to the alcohol flavours in this, but I wouldn't be surprised if there's a bit of, you know, caramel or something like that in this beer. But yeah, certainly in the middle of your palate, there's a good brown sugary element there. It is a little bit treacly and molasses-like, but it's not overly toasted. It still retains a good element of sweetness to it. So yeah, in the very centre of your palate, you've got a highly concentrated brown sugary sort of thing there. And as you move kind of further out from that, it does get a little bit more kind of toasted, if you like, and particularly in the back third and onto the back half there, it does get more kind of roasty and toasty. So I really like how everything pieces together in this beer. I think it works just really, really nicely. The brown sugary notes, that's obviously the alcohol in there, but the brown sugary notes gives you a good bit of contrast in the sweetness too. But this beer really has a level of complexity to it, and I like how this one evolves. Definitely, it's got a good balance between roastiness, slickness, and sweetness, and smoothness out of it too. So yeah, this gets a big thumbs up from me. And I think, to be honest, that covers the sort of middle third of your palate. This is where the majority of the complexity is in this beer. But yeah, on that border region between middle third and back third of your palate, you can feel there is a little bit of a sort of cakey, brownie type thing builds up there, and you get a bit more of a more intense kind of roastiness there. Then on the back third of your palate, you can feel there is a bit more of a kind of smooth, toasty, kind of grainy element to it as well, but you can feel the yeasty characters just sitting on top of that, so you can feel it's a bit more airy on that back third of your palate, and you get these nice yeasty things building up. So the top of the flavour in the back third of the palate is like this, and then it just condenses down to be a little bit kind of thicker as you go further forward into that middle third of your tongue. So yeah, I really like how that goes together in this beer. The malty and yeasty side of this one, and the adjuncts as well, are all just very, very nicely executed. But yeah, let's look at the hoppy side of things then. In the back corners of the palate, there's a nice roasty, toasty earthiness to the beer that builds a good bridge with the darker, roasty, grainy elements of it. But as you move further forward, it very quickly becomes more floral, and I would say that this beer has quite a deep floral character to it. I wouldn't describe it as spicy as anything like that. It's quite smooth, but like I say, there is a very deep green element to the beer, and then round the front curve of the palate, it's a little bit lighter and more grassy and things like that. So yeah, I do like how that side of the beer goes about its business, absolutely. So, yeah, the big kind of, the big sort of fruity elements to this beer are nice as well, but and that's another thing that we'll come to in just a second. But yeah, round the front curve of your palate, it's distinctly lighter and more kind of grassy in a sense. So yeah, you do get a little touch of zestiness out of this, but as I said earlier, the green components would drop out of this beer the more that you aged it. But yeah, it has got a nice floral presence and just a little touch of grassy zestiness there, and I can appreciate that in this beer, absolutely. But on that front third of your palate, as I always say, that's where you get that nice oily bubble where those juicy fruity esters just roll their way out of the beer. And this one again has a big oily slickness to it, but the base, that border region between front third and middle third of your palate, again you've got a big cakey element to it. So it's like a burnt kind of Christmas cakey sort of thing, and you get a bit of graininess there. And then the base of that front third of your palate again is a sort of toasty cakey kind of thing. Then you've got that oily bubble sitting on top of that, but at the back of that front third of your tongue, you've got a good little bit of a kind of raisiny sharpness to the beer. You've got some nice juicy plums in there as well, and then as you move further forward, it's actually interesting because the raisiny notes do kind of linger there, but as you reach the kind of front half of that front third of your tongue, it's black currant underneath, and then it's a sharper blackberry note sitting on top of that. So there's a real, for me, the fruits in this beer, I find them very sharp, and that's another thing that stands out to me about this one compared to the other Nerd Brewing beers. So yeah, this one, there's quite a few different points about this beer compared to some of the other Nerd ones that I've had before, and that's maybe one of the reasons why it kind of stands out to me a little bit. But it gets a massive thumbs up from me, this one. I think this would be in my top 2 or 3 Imperial Stouts that I've had from Nerd Brewing. I like this one. I've not had too many coconut Imperial Stouts, come to think of it, but I think this is a nice one. It is a bit more sweet and oily, if you like, compared to other Nerd Brewing ones, but as I always say, I love this thing that Nerd have where they always have that roasty toasty edge, and this beer has that trademark from Nerd Brewing, if you like. But yeah, let's round off the review with the mouthfeel then. I think we've covered the flavour profile as much as we need to. So yeah, mouthfeel, it's definitely full-bodied. I don't remember, this one doesn't strike me as being the thickest of beers that I've had from Nerd, come to think of it, but it's kind of right in the middle of the full-bodied spectrum for me. Carbonation is virtually smooth, almost to the point where it's nearly non-existent, it feels like, but it's got a really big, thick kind of slickness to it, this one, and I really like that. Bitterness of this beer, it says on the bottle that it's 60 IBUs. I probably would have guessed it was a little bit more than that, but remember, this is my weakest point of beer review, and my IBU, detecting IBUs, is not my strongest point at all, to be honest with you. So 60 IBUs makes sense, absolutely. But the malt base in this one, it's roasty underneath, it's kind of smooth in the middle, and then it's a bit sweeter on top. I think that's a good way to describe it. But at the back of the palate, definitely more kind of roasty and toasty again. But you've got a really good balance of things going on within that malt base there. The fruits in this beer strike me as being a little bit sharper and sweeter in a sense too, but again, I can really appreciate that about this one. And the green component for me is still quite fresh, but again, if you age the beer, that's going to fade away a little bit. But this is another beautiful stout from Nerd Brewing, and it's definitely worth trying if you get the chance. But I think we can round off the review there. This one has been a bit longer, and I think that's, one, because I'm a little bit tired, and two, because this beer does strike me as being a bit different compared to the other Nerd ones. But let's round it off there. So yeah, once again, thank you for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comment section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Nerd Brewing. We will no doubt return to these guys in the next little while. I don't know if they're releasing another beer for April of 2021, but if they are, I will make sure to pick it up, and hopefully I can get a hold of some of the barrel-aged things and review those for you as well. But yeah, thank you again for watching. Check out my social media, check out Nerd Brewing, and I'll see you guys in the next review. Happy Sunday. Slàinte, skål, cheers, and catch you in the next one.